Welcome to Caffeinated Flicks,
where we drink coffee and celebrate diverse directors.
I'm Celeste.
And I'm Kenzie. Today we have a very special treat. We are joined by Leah Bonnema. I was first introduced to Leah Bonnema when she was a special guest on the phenomenal podcast Fake the Nation with Nagin Farsad, which led me to begin to listen to Leah's podcast, Were You Raised by Wolves?, where she and her co-host, Nick Layton, provide exquisite etiquette advice for living in today's world. Leah is an incredible comedian who has been recognized by the Huffington Post as one of their favorite female comedians. And she was on the America Stand-Up shows at the International Glasgow Comedian Festival. Leah has had the honor of performing for our troops overseas, touring with Liz Winstead, Lady Part's Justice League, and has been featured in the New York Comedy Festival, the Lucille Ball Comedy Fest at the National Comedy Center, the Women in Comedy Festival, Politicon, and so many more. She has a wonderful little dog named Lacey. She is an author of a holiday romantic comedy called The Holiday Breakdown. Order yours today on Amazon. I have my copy here. And she's a giant Lord of the Rings fan, which Celeste and I can relate to.
Yes, hence why I thought you had a dog named Tempo.
No, it makes sense. I'm so delighted. I feel like I'm blushing. Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
thank you so much for joining us today. As we do, we start off every episode talking about our caffeine fixes. So today I cold brewed my own blueberry muffin Dunkin' Donut coffee. So that's what I'm drinking today. What about you, Leah?
I'm drinking. So Dustin, who is my fiance, but I refer to him as my boyfriend. I struggle with the term fiance. And I have been doing Whole30.
Oh, I just finished that.
Did you?
How's that going for you?
It's going well. But when I'm traveling, like you can't get a lot of places, you can't get almond milk that's unsweetened. So I've just been drinking so much black coffee, but we were able to get unsweetened almond milk today. So I did a cappuccino with unsweetened almond milk, and I feel like I'm on top of the world because that black coffee will hit you. It hits your stomach.
It certainly will. I started to just really enjoy nothing's better than like a black iced coffee when it's nice and cold and you just sit there and you're like, oh, this nice, fresh, refreshing black coffee once you started to get into that groove of just no sugar for a while.
Cold is very nice. I feel like a hot black coffee is not quite as...
I can't do it either way.
Then you just finished Whole30? I know it's not what we're talking about, but I am very curious.
No, absolutely. I just finished it. So I have chronic migraines, and so I wanted to see if it would help with my chronic migraine. It did not. Spoiler alert. But I thought I'd try.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did just finish it. I had bought like a whole bunch of like Waterloo waters and everything. Like I had just basically been eating so many fruits and vegetables and so many things. And I had been watching like your stories and stuff like that about like traveling. And I can see like I'm vegan. So it's hard to do a lot of things, especially travel, just being vegan. And I can only imagine like doing Whole30 and trying to travel is so difficult. You have to be an active problem solver on the road a lot when you're trying to travel and do those things and be able to eat and eat sufficiently and be full and be just satisfied.
Yeah, I was like, I may have overdone the boiled eggs because you just get those in a bag.
One can only do so many boiled eggs.
One can only do. And I did that and more. So,
oh no.
So many almonds. I ate so many like mixed nuts.
Oh, good for you guys. I don't have it in me. I'm doing the opposite. I am doing like the sweetest drink out there. I also went to Starbucks this morning, but I got a soy matcha. So I'm pretty sure it's sweetened and vanilla flavored. So. Yeah. And I did extra scoops of matcha, so I'm doing all the sweetness, and I love it.
You're on a matcha kick lately, aren't you?
I am, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's just like green spring kind of a feel to it.
Yeah, it's just the vibe right now.
Awesome. I love it. Well, cool. So a little bit about our movie today. So today we are doing Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer that came out in 2013. So this movie, as a brief overview, after an attempt to stop global warming via a climate engineering catastrophe, backfires, creating a new ice age in 2014, and basically makes it so that way humanity is stuck within a circumnavigational train going all the way around the world. And so all of humanity is just stuck in this train. So a little bit of information about Bong Joon-ho. Bong Joon-ho is a South Korean filmmaker, and he's the recipient of 3 Academy Awards. His filmography is characterized on social themes, genre mixing, black humor, and sudden tone shifts, which I think you can see throughout Snowpiercer for sure. Lots and lots of black humor in this one. Lots of social themes. I've seen a lot of the different articles that I read, a lot of classism, a lot of climate change discussions within this particular movie. Some of the other attributes to Bong Joon-ho, he frequently casts Song Kang-ho and references Alfred Hitchcock. He is the second Asian director to win an Oscar for Best Director after Ang Lee. And Ang Lee is the director for Sense and Sensibility, which we will be covering next week. Ang Lee also directed Life of Pi, Brokeback Mountain, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. He is also the first Korean director to win the Oscar for Best Director. Bong was enrolled in Yonsei University in 1988, majoring in sociology. And at Yonsei, this was a hotbed for South Korean democracy movements. And Bong was an active participant in student demonstrations, which we can kind of see how that resonates through a lot of his movies.
I know. Yeah. I don't know why I did that. Sorry.
Don't mind me. So
I felt like it deserved an applause.
So in Snowpiercer, we've got a wide cast of individuals. So we've got Chris Evans, we've got Kang Ho-sung, we've got Tilda Swinton, Ed Harrison again. We've got Jamie Bell, Octavia Spencer, John Hurt, who was in our Hellboy episode as Professor Broom, Allison Pill, and then some other smatterings of individuals. But those are our top casts. And so we've got quite the diverse cast.
Very solid. Mm-hmm.
We've got women of color, men of color. We've got different age range of people as well. And lots of different speaking roles. And ironically enough, Tilda Swinton's character was supposed to be originally man's role. And they even call her Sir during the first introduction of Minister Manson. And they wanted to keep it that way. They wanted to keep her mostly androgynous throughout this movie.
I love her. Let me just say that. She's always so fantastic.
So funny.
She is good at playing character roles.
When they called her Sir, I immediately thought of, oh my God, as soon as I said it out loud, Battlestar Galactica, where everybody gets called Sir. And I was like, very, very gender neutral. And they used it that way. Everybody's Sir.
Right. Kind of reminds me of like when I was watching Chernobyl and everybody's comrade. Like, no matter who you are, everybody's comrade. I know that's kind of dicey right now with Russia being Russia. But so shall we get into the readings then?
Yes.
So, Leah, did you want to read the 10 out of 10?
I did want to read the 10 out of 10. Of course, I moved to look more at Tilda Swinton, and then we're getting right back to it. Here we go. So this is the ratings, 10 out of 10. Snowpiercer is maybe one of the best films I have ever seen, and I've seen many. People are saying that there are many potholes and problems, but watch it again and you'll see your opinion has a pothole. Let me say that again. Watch it again and you'll see your opinion has a pothole because there is almost nothing wrong with this movie. Maybe one or two problems like shaky cam, but not as much as the Bourne movies. And people love those movies. I'm not saying compare it to the Bourne films. I'm just saying watch it once, think about it. Then if you still don't, quote, understand it, watch it again. Trust me, you won't regret it. It's an awesome film.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't control the grammar on these reviews.
I just wanted to give it the right punch where it needed it. You know what I mean?
You did perfect. I loved it.
Love it.
I could really sense the enthusiasm that was put behind that 10 out of 10.
I love it when people get excited. You know what I mean?
I do too.
Yeah. You have potholes.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Celeste, you want to read the 1 out of 10?
Yes. So, this is one of those movies that I keep hearing good things about. Yet when watching it, I can't find a single one. Ooh, it's pretentious, full of massive plot holes, and has so many ridiculous premises that I couldn't wrap my head around it. All the above was so distracting for me that I couldn't even suspend my belief and try to enjoy the visuals. I have absolutely no idea what people are seeing in this movie and how such a good director could make something so unwatchable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when we read these 1 out of 10, Celeste and I are like, what are these people watching? Are they watching the same movie?
Yeah.
You can often click on this, right, and see all the things they've left on other things, right? So I'm under the impression that some people just go through saying they hate everything because they're
trolls, probably.
They're trolls.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. I think our favorite one was when we watched Whale Rider. And in the Whale Rider review, he's like, we didn't even see whales.
I know, yeah.
Like, there's whales within like the first 20 minutes. What are you talking about?
People are wild.
Yeah, they
It's
are.
fun.
They say things just to say things.
Yeah. Well, shall we crack into it then?
Crack in.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, cool. So as the opening credits roll, we hear a lot of different news broadcasts explaining about a different compound. I believe it's called CW7 that's being released into the atmosphere to reduce the effects of man-made climate warming. Did you hear anything about this in your comedy for climate change?
So for those listening at home, I just got back from DC where they took 9 comics and we studied with environmental scientists and behavior scientists with the goal of trying to make media that's like more digestible and funny and uplifting about climate stuff. And now that I just got back from that, I've seen this movie before. I rewatched it last night because in my mind I was like, oh, they're on the train because of climate change. They're not on the train because of climate change. They're on the train because climate change was happening. And instead of reducing carbon emissions and stopping the beef industry, we shot stuff up into the atmosphere, which is why everything froze over. Instead of being like, This is the work we have to change, we're like, let's try this other thing. And that's the thing that threw them into an ice age.
Right.
So I did notice that. I was like, oh, I guess we just couldn't switch to electric.
Yeah.
Instead, we have to explode things into the atmosphere.
Yeah. And I'm really curious because there's not like a whole lot of nationalities. Like I know that we talked about like having a diverse cast, and there is an allusion to having different voice or language translators later on in the film, but there's not a whole bunch of different nationalities other than Korean and the English speaking individuals. Like I don't hear a whole lot of German folk. I don't hear a whole lot of like Mexican individuals. I don't hear a whole lot of other individuals. Meanwhile, this train is supposed to have hit like every continent, so they must have picked up people from everywhere, right?
Well, I think it's just the people that got on when it first happened.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I'm going to play, it's possible that all those people in the up front cars, we just couldn't hear them speaking.
That's true. Nobody spoke up there, so they just kind of gawked.
We just walked through.
True.
So as you alluded to, we get a glimpse at jets in the air, and we see their kind of chemtrails floating past. And then we cut to the train speeding past in the snow. Inside the train, we see armed guards heading towards a group of individuals, and they begin to start counts. These individuals are a bit grimy, if you will. They look like they've kind of seen some shit. They're being ordered to get down. We're introduced to Curtis, who is Chris Evans, and his friend Edgar, who's Jamie Bell. The guards ask if there are any violinists in the crowd. We are then introduced to a gentleman and they were once the violinists for the Boston Orchestra. And while we're being introduced to them, everybody gets to one side of the train car and they are lining up to get their day's portion of this gelatinous protein fiber bar. Thoughts on this gelatinous protein fiber bar?
delicious.
I mean, they just make it look so slimy and just horrific. Like one color, you know what I mean?
It looks like rotted Jello.
Rotten jello.
Can Jello rot?
I don't think so, but if it could,
If it could, it would look like that.
It looks very much like Jello. So Bong Joon-ho explained that the protein blocks are made out of seaweed, tangle, sugar, and gelatin. And Jamie Bell said that he hated it, and Tilda Swinton said that she liked it.
That sounds tasty. That doesn't sound bad.
It sounds like Tilda would like it.
It sounds
You know what I mean?
tolerable.
So the guards ask the gentleman who said that we play violin to show them his hands. And so he shows them his hand and he says, okay, we'll take one. And he says, not both? And he says, of course we'll take both hands. And that's where that black humor comes in. And he's like, no, if I can't take my wife, I'm not going. And at that point in time, that's when they beat down his wife. They steal him away. And we get a gruesome scene where people are taken apart. And this gentleman is not to be seen from for a long, long time. And the woman gets back in line. She grabs her protein bar and she doesn't say a single thing in this entire scene.
And then she's walking away with that broken nose because they hit her in the head with the butt of their gun, which I think is like one of the most violent visuals on. And then she's got that broken, and then she's eating her rotten Jello.
Oh, poor thing.
And you're just like, brutal.
Oh, absolutely. We transition to Curtis going through the bunks. We see lots of people on top of one another in different bunk beds, and he's looking for somebody or something. And this is where we're introduced to Tanya, who's played by Octavia Spencer, and her son, Tim. At this point in time, they see that Tim has his fiber bar, and they're trying to bargain him for it. They're like, we'll give you this fiber bar for that fiber bar, and we'll give you 2 fiber bars for that fiber bar. We'll give you 3 of them for that one. And then he runs away, and they have to chase after him. Curtis finally gets up to him, and he finally gets the fiber protein bar.
But I think he makes good with Tim. I mean,
There you go.
Yep, Curtis is like the leader of the group. He's the go-to person that everybody kind of relies on. Tanya, once she gets back to Curtis, says, is it time? And we as the audience are like, time for what? What's happening? They cut into the protein bar and we see that there's a little bullet shell. And inside that bullet shell, there's a red message. And we're introduced to Gilliam, played by John Hurt. They learn the name of the security expert. That was what was on the message inside the bullet. And this is Nam. He's the person who can open up the security gates that's keeping them locked into the back of the train. And as Curtis was standing earlier in the scene, he was counting how long it took for the gates themselves to close. And he said it takes 4 seconds for the doors to close. And so they know how long it takes for them to get through. And he wants to get to the front of the train. He says he wants to get to the engine at the front of the train, and he wants to kill Wilford. Wilford is the person who runs the entire train. He's the person in charge of their entire ecosystem, essentially. He's kind of the man behind the curtain at Oz, essentially. So then we cut to Edgar and Curtis lying down in their bunks. It's later in the evening. And Edgar says that Gilliam will die someday and that Curtis is somebody who would be a great leader. Curtis asks Edgar how far he can remember. And he says that he can kind of remember what his mother looks like. And we will find out later on that this has significance. Their conversation gets interrupted as guards are coming past and they're doing bed checks. And they're checking for children. They're getting all of the children put together in the front of the train car itself. And as the children are getting put together, more of the adults are coming together as well. So then we see a woman in a yellow dress, Claude. She is measuring children. She is measuring for a specific height and measuring for a specific build, and we can't really figure out why. As she's doing so, she sees Tanya, and she goes and she looks at her. She takes her tape measure, and she lifts up Octavia's skirt, and she doesn't see an extra pair of feet, but somehow knows that there's a little one at her feet. And so Octavia, as soon as she drops her skirt, throws her son Tim behind her and tells him to run, but it's of no avail. They start to beat down Octavia, and they go and they chase after Tim, and they bring Tim. He's held upside down by his feet, and Claude measures him. They take him and another little boy named Andy, and they are never to be heard or seen from again. We see that the father of Andy takes his shoe off and throws it at Claude's face, causing her to bleed. The dad is taken by the guards. His shirt is taken off. He's being fitted for a metal cuff around his shoulder. They take off a metal, I'm trying to think of what to call it, like a saucer that leads to the outside. And then they hook his arm into that opening. And his arm is then exposed to the outside so that way it can freeze solid.
Cool.
And I'll push right through, and they say out loud, at this altitude, it will only take 7 minutes for it to freeze off. I found this scene to be like the most ideal. You know what I mean? They're all violent. It's all violence, but for some reason, this is for me like the most uncomfortable.
Yeah, like it's very torture-esque.
Yeah.
And the actor's face is so good. Like you can tell
Very
his arm
disturbing.
is burning, and then it's itching, and then he's terrified, and then he like kind of gives up, and then
Yeah, he goes through different stages. We can clearly like see that in his expressions. So that was rough.
and you're like, who thought of this? You know what I mean? It's
Twisted. I know, right?
This is where we're also introduced to Minister Mason, Tilda Swinton.
she's wearing a fabulous outfit.
I got real life Yzma vibes. Like if you've ever seen The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh.
I haven't, but I will have to Google.
I got Alice in Wonderland character, like vibes from her. Like the evil queen, like the way she spoke, her like movement, it reminded me a lot of the Red Queen.
Yeah, I got Yzma vibes. Not so much in the way that she dressed, a little bit more so in the angular features that she has going on, but also the way that she's characterized and the personality that comes together.
Yeah,
will
very
check it out.
underrated Disney film.
Get down here.
Minister Mason, she's given the shoe that was thrown at Claude, and she begins a speech that basically comes down to everybody should know their place. This is all about classism, essentially. And that otherwise we're brought into size 10 chaos. I just thought it was so funny that she looked at the shoe. She's like, this is size 10 chaos.
And then I wrote down, it's so funny, my note taking, I just wrote down, be a shoe. Because that's what he was like trying to be ahead. And this is, I feel like, where they introduced the preordained idea. Like, where you're the tail, we're the head, be a shoe.
Know your place.
And I feel like that happens throughout this movie entirely. So after she's given this whole speech, there was a point, I think they had like 30 seconds left or something like that. And she like, oh, we've got 30 seconds of time left. Let's see if we can call Wilford. Let's see if he's got anything inspirational to say. And they have absolutely nothing. They can't get anything from him. They're like, oh, well, they pull the gentleman's arm in and it's completely frozen solid. Like you can see that it's ice. And they bring a mallet in and they just shatter it. And the poor man just screams. You don't see it being shattered, which the brilliance of the directing, but you just know that it's happening.
And then you see pieces of it on the ground.
It leaves it up to your imagination, and that's almost worse.
Which is horrible. We fill in all the gaps.
Yep.
We see later on in the film, too, the stump that's basically left from it. So just the amount of agony that kind of comes with that.
Oh,
I know. We're like, ugh.
I feel like we really only see that in like 2 movies, that and then Misery, with where she, you know, where you see somebody just hitting somebody's limbs like that. This really gets inside your brain.
Ugh. I like horror, but there's only so much I can do sometimes. Like when it comes to puncturing the skin, I'm just like, oh God, no.
I don't like gory horror. It's too much.
Psychological thriller, I'm there for
Yeah,
it. I'm here
love
for it.
that, but
like,
not all the gore.
I'll do a slasher
Sure.
because they're usually funny.
Like, do you like the Saw movies? Are you
The
into
what?
those? The Saw movies, all of
No.
those? Nope.
I like the first one.
I like the first one.
The first
and
one was
then-
good. Yeah.
Then
After
it's almost
that,
like torture. I mean, like torture. Obviously, it's torture, but I mean, like that's the whole. And you're like, I can't take it. Like, I couldn't take the tourist one where they went to that place and they got. Oh, too much. I don't know. I blocked it out of my
the
mind.
tour. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, goodness. So the poor man's arm is shattered, and then Gilliam comes forward. The guard orders him to sit down, and Minister Mason instructs him to put down that worthless weapon. Gilliam demands to have a meeting with Wilford, specifically in the front of the train. And Minister Mason's like, you're not going to get that. Then we cut to Edgar, who's gathering supplies from around the end of the train, and he's rolling around these large metal drums. We see Curtis, who goes to a man about Chronal. Now, Chronal is like this world's version of a very highly potent drug, but also highly combustible material. If you sniff it, it gets you high. If you light it on fire, it blows shit up. So it can do many, many things.
Universal.
It is universal, exactly. Curtis tells Gilliam that the guns are useless. They don't have any bullets. They're extinct. He was looking at how the guns are being carried, that they don't have any magazines to them, and that the way that the minister said, put down the worthless weapon when Gilliam came up to the front, made him realize they have nothing to be worried about. The painter, who is a gentleman who is known for being able to make these charcoal drawings, these very expressive charcoal drawings, comes over to the man whose arm was shattered, as well as to Tanya, and he gives them both portraits of their children, and an alarm starts to go off as the guards start to come through to do a head check. And as they start to count, Edgar starts a distraction. They're saying, the time is now to start the revolution. Curtis, while it does take a moment for him to kind of have it all settle in, after a couple of tense beats, he runs straight up to the front to one of the guards. He takes the point of the rifle. He points it straight in at his head. The guard pulls the trigger, and absolutely nothing happens. At this point in time, everybody rushes the guards, and Edgar and everybody pull this massive tube through so that way they can block the doors from being able to close. And as they do so, they keep running into several more guards, as you do when you start a revolution. So once they reach the end of as far as they can go, they go to reach somebody who they have as an expert fighter. Gray comes through. He's running across the top of the tubes, and he does, what do we want to call this move? He does like a spinning
Parkour.
That's what
it looked like to me.
I love it. Yes, he did like parkour mixed with some like kung fu mixed with like, I don't even know what else. Just badassery. There we go. We'll call it that. And he takes down this massive guard who is blocking their way. And so from there, all the guards are taken out, and they see that they are able to take the giant traditional set of useless amounts of keys that you usually find on a guard. So
Oh, yeah.
they go to what looks like a morgue, essentially, where you've got all the different beds of people who would be lying in a morgue. And they find the bed of where the security engineer was. And Edgar is trying all the different keys on this useless key ring for the key of the security engineer, Nam. And Curtis is like, would you hurry it up? And he's like, I would, but there are 1,000 keys on here. So they finally make it to the right one. He opens it up. They pull him out and they take a chrono and they put it in front of his face. He kind of slowly sits up. He looks around, puts his back up against the wall, and they're starting to talk to him and starting to insult him, essentially. They're like, do you not speak English? Is your brain fried? Like, what's happening here? And so then he points to behind them, and there are translators behind him. And so then he starts to speak into the translator, and they speak into a translator, and they're able to communicate finally. From that point, he pulls out cigarettes. And they say, oh, I thought cigarettes went extinct 10 years ago. Apparently, a lot of things went extinct a long time ago. They use the word extinct very frequently in this movie. While he's smoking a cigarette, and he's saying, you know, who says that I'm going to help you? You're an asshole. Like, I want nothing to do with you. He decides to punch some people, kick some people. He grabs the keys from them, and then he opened up another door and drawer without as much of trouble as what Edgar had. And he's like, I'll only help you if she comes with me. This is my daughter, and we're going to require 2 chrono per gate every time we go through a gate, and then I will help you. And Curtis, who's played by Chris Evans again, is like, she's an addict too? And they're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So then, Nam, he gets them through the first gate, and it's pitch dark, and then they're shocked by the light of the windows. They haven't seen light in so long. And not only is it light, it's also bright white light because it's so snowy and frozen outside. The sunlight that's bouncing off of the snow is creating just incredible sunlight. If you've ever seen snow, which I'm pretty sure, I know that you have, Leah, because I know that you lived in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And so the amount of light that bounces off of snow is absolutely incredible compared to just like regular sunlight.
Oh, yeah. It's so reflective when it's icy.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah. How wild. What does that do to like a person's like mental health to not
never
see
see light?
the day of light for God knows how long? I don't know.
Well, where are they
Probably.
peeing? There's so many things that we worry about their mental health. Lack of light. I don't think I saw a bathroom. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, we're just living in each other.
Darkness.
Like,
yeah.
Do they even learn? Do they write? I'm wondering all these
They're
things.
probably just there for labor, honestly.
Yeah. it
But what
seems
do
like
they
they're-
do?
What train maintenance? I don't know what that consists of, but that's all I can think of. Who knows?
So many things.
Yeah, so many questions.
But yes, so they're blinded by this light. Blinded by the light.
I don't know that line, but I always thought it was wrapped up like a douche, but there's no way that's what it is.
I think it's revved up like the deuce. And it's supposed to be like a reference to a car, I think.
Wrapped
No
up like
idea
a
what
douche.
you guys are singing.
Not wrapped up like a douche, which is not healthy for your pH balance.
No.
I wonder how the French would understand that. I don't know. I just remember like learning French in French class. Like you learn that to like douche is like to shower, and you're like, that is not the same context here in America.
We took that word and we really rolled with it. So
We really ruined it. Is really what
Yeah,
happened.
We did.
We do that with a lot of words.
We did.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, we just do that with so many things. Like not even just words.
How we roll, man.
How we do things. Oh man. Do. All right.
You're coming to my favorite scene, so I'm trying to be calm.
So Curtis asks Yona, who is Nam's daughter, how did you know no one was there? And then this is where, as Nam is trying to open up the second door, this is when she explains he's running. The next car door, as the door is opening, we see Paul, who we assume used to be at the back of the train with them, as they all seem to know who he is. He's running towards them, but he jumps up and he grabs onto like what looks like a, oh gosh, what's it called? Like a fire hose.
Wheels that turns things.
Yeah, wheel that turns things. He grabs onto that and he's like, they used to be able to do this automatically, and now I got to do this manually. And then he drops down and he's very excited to see everybody, but he can't stop. He's like, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I can't take a break. I got to keep going. And he just looks like he is hopped up on something. I don't know if it's chrono. I don't know if it's something else.
Paul's lost it.
And they don't even like, have you not spoken to anybody else in 5 years? He's got that like wild eyes of a person who's been isolated.
Yeah.
It really must be. Like, nobody comes through, like, ever. Like, they've passed at least several trains, and we know that guards come through to the back at least. Like, they must pass through his train car at least. Like,
they must not acknowledge him.
Yeah, they probably pass through but don't have any real deep combos.
There's no actual interaction maybe that goes on.
So I just got back from New York and I saw Chicago. I always think of Mr. Cellophane. So I wonder if that's how he feels. He's like, Cellophane, Mr. Cellophane. I like to sing a lot, and I like to tell people I'm like a human jukebox. I can sing almost anything just based off of a word or a feeling. Ridiculous.
Wonderful.
Then there are all of these protein blocks coming out of this conveyor belt, and there's this giant contraption that looks like so I'm really into craft beer, and so we've been on different craft brewery tours, and so it looks like a drum for craft beer. And so there's a little ladder, and the painter goes up on top of the little ladder, and he looks inside, and what looks like 1,000 crickets being milled and going into these gelatinous protein bars. Is that what y'all saw?
I thought they were cockroaches.
I thought they were cockroaches.
Which made it like this scene more evil, and love it.
I feel like the first time I watched it, I was way more grossed out by that. But now I'm like, it's a protein, right?
I thought that too. I was like, this is so gross. But then I was like, that's so smart because they're great sources of protein. And then also I read online that they're high in, let's see, iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium. So it's just all sorts of good things in there.
It just looks gross, but I think it's not the worst thing to be eating. And not that I want to eat it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We're one of the only nations that don't eat bugs as like a regular staple, you know?
Yeah, I think other people eat bugs. We eat bugs. We're just sleeping, and they were flying into our mouths.
They just crawl into our mouths while we're sleeping.
All the benefits we don't know it. It's fun.
Yeah, we are.
A little taste.
Yeah, a lot of Mexican candy has like crickets and all sorts of goodies like that in it.
Scorpions.
So. Yep.
You know.
Sweetness.
So Celeste and I are in Arizona, and one of the great treats of Arizona is you often will find little lollipops with scorpions in the middle.
Have you had that?
I haven't, no, but I bought it for my dad.
Do people actually lick the scorpion?
I think so. I'm pretty sure my dad's eaten them.
It's in
My
like,
brother's eaten
yeah,
them.
it's kind of like what's at the center lollipop. So you get to the center. And then I think you just eat it at that point.
Yeah. Is it like a chocolate Tootsie? Or is it not like that?
My dad and my brothers will eat just about anything. Like I'm pretty sure I have bought them like crickets and stuff like that just for funsies, like flavored crickets and stuff.
Because if you close your eyes, it's just like, I would imagine,
Crunchy.
like bacon. Crunchy bacon.
You're selling Leah on it. I can see it in her face now.
I just really hope I don't end up eating bugs on a train. Do you know what I mean? But also, you didn't make the train. You just froze to death. So it's like,
these are desperate times. We can't be too picky.
yeah, you're like, come on. I hope I'm in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it fits in the whole 30, you know?
Oh, yeah.
That's really what I was thinking. It's in one of the food groups. People are like, what are you eating? I'm like, there's like 5 things I'm eating. And I could eat bugs.
Right. There you go. You could. You expand your horizon.
Not a grain, not a legume, not a sugar, not a dairy.
Part of a whole foods diet.
It's on a salad, just a little crunchy.
Replace the croutons with crickets.
Exactly.
There you go.
I just don't want to see their eyeballs.
It's kind of like a shrimp.
Oh,
I don't eat those
without the
either.
head. I don't either.
But I was thinking maybe look like crustaceans. They look like crustaceans.
Oh, we just
Sorry. We just had this joke in one of our previous episodes where Celeste didn't know that crustacean was the overall term for like
I didn't know it
crabs
was a
and
real
shrimp
word.
and lobsters.
And so I was going with it. I'm like, okay, we're making up our own words here. She's like, no, it's a real word.
Where would you run into it? If you're
Right?
not in a
Like,
coastal city?
crustacean isn't necessarily part of like everyone's everyday vocabulary.
It also sounds almost like a moon or a planet. Crustacean.
Right?
Like an orbiting planet.
Something in outer space. Yeah.
Yes. One of Jupiter's rings.
Love it.
Oh, see, and what really happened was like when Curtis said, like, you're not allowed to draw this, coming back to the movie about like the bugs and stuff like that, I thought it was because, you know, they were told like everything went extinct when the Ice Age happened. So for me, I thought it was like, if we tell them that bugs exist, then what happens outside of the train means that we could potentially live outside of the train, in which case we're not really just sequestered to the train itself. And so I was really confused, but that could just be my own interpretation.
I think he was saying don't tell them because you don't want to ruin it for them.
Yeah.
Because my guess is that the bugs are on the train.
Yeah. Oh,
I
I
think
took
he was
it
like,
too.
don't let them know we're eating bugs. Like, let them think we're eating
Poor things. Like something that's not an insect.
Jell-O, which is made out of horse hooves. So much more normal.
When I tell people that gelatin's made out of like horse bones and stuff like that, or just like animal bones in general,
Yeah.
they're like, really? And I was like, yes, that's why I, as a vegan, cannot eat them.
People don't really want to know what they're eating sometimes.
I don't eat anything with nipples. That's my personal rule. So that includes anything with nipples, bones. So
I like it.
I will eat a chicken. And
I was just thinking, I'm like, dude, chickens have nipples? I don't think they do.
No, I'm gonna eat you. But if you can bear live children,
She's like, no mammalian.
no mammalians. And I won't even eat your bones. It's not even just the meat.
No, she can eat snakes. She's like, I'm good with that. Just picture me for
I could
snakes
eat
and
snakes.
alligators.
Alligators I'll eat. I will eat shellfish, but I don't eat it. But not for any kind of moral reasons.
I love it. So Celeste and I met because we were both vegetarians at the time, and people like to ask me, and they're like, oh, did you stop for the animals? And I'm like, not really. Like, it's really more for the environment than anything else. But hey, it works.
Yeah. I didn't have like some moving reason either. I was like, I think I just read an article and decided to stop. I was like, sure, why not?
It's a big deal. If we stopped all carbon emissions today, we would still have to change our diet because that's how much
of an
meat
impact.
industry is effing up our atmosphere, and then we're all going to end up on a train.
We're gonna be
Peeing on each other.
we're gonna end up in a train
Peeing in a
eating
corner.
gelatin cockroaches.
Cockroaches.
Yeah.
Yum. Gonna be
That's where
so
we're
tasty.
headed.
We are coming into my favorite scene.
Now, after Curtis and the painter have gotten down off of the brewer's drum, essentially, he sees a little bullet on the side, and it has a note for him as well. And then we switch to Edgar berating Nam about opening the gate. And Edgar is very obnoxious about Nam being able to open this gate. He's very on edge about it. He's like, what are we paying? Like, you just want the chrono. What's taking you so long? And I'm like, would you just calm down, Edgar? Would you just
Well, I
chill?
realized at the end he's supposed to be 17. Explains more because 17-year-olds' brains aren't formed yet, so they
That's
just get
true.
worked up.
How
And he
old
doesn't
is he in
look
real
17,
life,
so it
though?
just seems like a man yelling, which
Mhm.
also is normal.
I think he was 26 when he did this. So even still.
I just know him as Billy Elliot. I think in that he was pretty young, but he wasn't that young. I didn't think that was that long ago.
And then Curtis asks Yona how old she is, and she responds that she's 17. So we've got Edgar and Yona, who are both 17. And then Curtis, this is where we find out that he's supposed to be, I suppose, 34, because he says that he was on Earth 17 years, and then he's been on the train for 17 years, and he doesn't want to remember anything before he met Gillian. And then Curtis then flat out asks Yona if she's clairvoyant. And she doesn't answer. She just stands in front of the door. And of course, at the moment that her father, Nam, connects the gate so that it opens, she says, "Don't open the gate." And of course, the gate opens. We see a sea of menacing men, all wearing black, and they're wearing trench coats and ski masks, all with different openings. So some have the openings over their mouths, some have some openings over their eyes. I'm pretty sure one probably had their openings over their noses. I don't know. But I'm just like, what's happening here?
And they're wearing like leather butchers aprons. And they all have like not axes. It's like a hand. I guess it's kind of an axe, but it's shorter. It's such a visual. And then the music changes and it's a very Bad News Bears, ominous.
Yes, absolutely. And then, of course, they pick up this fish and then they like gut this fish during the scene too. And I'm assuming it's supposed to be threatening when they already look threatening, but can't necessarily figure that out.
I felt like they were making their axe blades red. Like that was some sort of a marking that they're ready to draw blood. But they definitely, I felt like the fish meant a lot to them emotionally, that everybody saw them kill the fish. And you're like, this is your, I feel like if I was there, I would have been like, we get it.
Yeah.
You're scary.
Move this along. You're dragging this out unnecessarily.
Okay. With the murder.
And then we have like this short, like almost jets versus sharks kind of like dance moves real quick before they get into like full on murder of each other. But when we start getting into the full on axing of one another, to me, this part was very reminiscent of storming of Minas Tirith of Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Like, to me, it was very bludgeoning of one another, taking one another out, blood going all over the place, slicing one right after the other, lots of shots moving back and forth. And I was just waiting for like one of the peeps in blacks to be like a Nazgûl to say like, "No mortal man can kill me," and then to have like Octavia Spencer say, "I am no mortal man," and then like come and kill somebody.
That's funny you mentioned that, because with the fish, it was giving a lot of like Gollum eating the fish vibes. Well, they just do the close up of the fish being just like ripped apart. I was getting
like, this fish really means a lot to people. It's such a good point.
Yeah.
And it's also the people from the back do not have a lot of weapons. So they're just, it's like men with axes and then people.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the other thing that really boggled my mind, is like, there's this menacing sea of men in black, and they all have these hardcore axes essentially. And then we've got the people from the back of the train that really don't have anything. Where did they get weaponry to really kick ass?
I think they picked it up after
From the
they
dead.
got people, but a few of them had like pipes, but they were just running at them with nothing.
Just a hope and a dream.
Hoping for the best.
No, right before this, we forgot to say Chris Evans opened up the red bullet and it said blood.
Oh. I was trying to figure out what that meant.
And it means it's coming. And then he had said to the guy that's has been in there too long making the Jello, "Where did you get this? Like, where are these coming from?" And he's like, I don't know. People just drop it off. And then it says blood. And then now they're obviously in a bloodbath.
Right. See, that didn't ever click for me until just now when you said that.
For me either.
So I feel like right at this point, we're starting to realize, oh, maybe the bullets aren't coming from a person helping, like that has been set up to think they were.
Especially as we continue to progress throughout and how they come down the pike further.
Some of the plot holes are starting to make sense to me now, because I was like, and that was one of my questions. I'm like, where are these coming from? Because I thought it was coming from the guy making the crickets. And then, yeah, you mentioned there was another one. So
We find out at the end where they're coming from.
Right. But you fell asleep during that part.
You fell asleep during that part. So that's actually not actually our writer said they were potholes. It's actually not a pothole. They got that up for us.
Maybe they fell asleep too.
They must have. That's what happened. Yep. So ironically enough, Chris Evans had finished filming the first Avengers movie right as he started filming this one. So Captain America is kicking ass during this scene and taking names. And then what I love is that he just randomly slips on the fish.
Yes. It's like this amazing fight scene right before. Like, as you were saying, it's a lot of like moving, and then all of a sudden, fish takes him out.
Yep. Out of everything there.
Banana gag. That classic banana gag. Then the man in black is like gonna bring his axe down, and then all of a sudden Edgar steps in and he just body slams him to save him. And then we hear a foghorn, and we see the commanding officers come around, and they let them all know that they're passing Serena Bridge. I don't know if I said that right. We're gonna hope that maybe I did. Probably not, but we'll go on from there. And then they begin to count down to New Year's. So we learn throughout this entire movie that the train itself goes around the world in one whole year. And so they hit the same marks, the same time every year. And so they all do the countdown to the new year. They say Happy New Year. And then they see ahead of the train, the tracks have hit barriers of solid ice. And they have to ram through these barriers of solid ice to where the train starts to wobble on and off the tracks a couple of times. And that happens, I think, 3 or 4 times, where they have to hold on to either side of the train and hope to, dear God, they don't fall off.
That part reminded me of the Polar Express.
Very much so. I had the same thought. I was like, I'm getting flashbacks of Tom Hanks. What's happening?
Yeah. If we were in a whole other genre, this would be a Christmas movie.
I love it. So then they finally realize, they're like, okay, we've surpassed the worst of it. We can start kicking each other's asses again. And so they go back to start fighting, and like maybe 3 or 4 of them start. And then all of a sudden, Minister Mason comes back and she berates them for their selfishness and their violent hooliganism. And so they have to stop fighting. It's kind of like they were being yelled at by mom. And they're like, okay, exactly 74% of you will die now. And as she mentions that, all of the men in black start to put on night vision goggles. And she brings up like these binoculars that have night vision goggles. And of course, the people from the back of the train have no idea what's going on. And Nam is speaking to Curtis, and Yona is translating for him. And he says, you guys are fucked. There's a tunnel, fucking long one. And so then they hit the tunnel, and it is pitch black. And we start to see everything from the night vision goggle point of view from the guys in black. And we see them starting to take out people left and right because they have the advantage over people who can't see. And then all of a sudden, Curtis remembers there was a little kid who took a pack of matches from Nam and says, we need fire. And from the very back of the group of people, he lights a torch and carries it like it's the Olympics from one person to a group of people, and they have fire. There's so many people with fire in this very small area, confined area.
Yeah.
With Chrono, which is highly combustible. Sorry, it just hit me. I'm like, oh my God, that could have gotten way out of hand. So they're able to see. And what I love is, so we mentioned Greg, who's their prized fighter, right? He doesn't say a word ever in this entire movie. And I think he might be mute. But he's got some tattoos on his arm, and he takes hold of one of the commanding officers. And on his arm, it says surrender on the inside of his arm and die on the outside of his arm. And so he shows the commanding officer, surrender or die. And he says, surrender. And so he yells to Minister Mason, surrender, tell them to surrender, tell them to surrender. And she kind of poshes off and goes and does her own thing. He's like, oh, fuck. And then Gray just takes him out. Curtis sees that we've got two general mob type men. We've got like a head honcho mob man, and then we've got like his helper mob man. And helper mob man has Edgar, and he stabs Edgar in the back, and this kills him.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No, he has to, Chris Evans has to make a choice between getting, I can't remember anybody's character names, but Tilda Swinton is getting out the door.
Yeah,
he's going after her. And then he looks back and he sees that mob guy has Edgar. So she looks back and he sees he has to choose between stopping Tilda Swinton or letting his best friend die. So I felt like that was his moment as a transition into a leader, because he has to choose the good of the group. And as he grabs her, he hears him and he knows that he died.
You're totally right. So he grabs Tilda Swinton because he's like, nope, I'm taking a hold of you. You are going to be my captor now. Then Yona comes out of the passage in the wall, essentially. And as she does, one of the mob men, rushes to come past her, and she kind of kicks this sharp object and impales him. And he lands straight on it. And as he's tilting forward and falling further and further on it, he grabs her face with his bloodied hand and covers her nose with it. And it's just so gross. Not gonna lie, that part really grossed me out.
It is gross.
Nuts.
It was, yeah.
But then Nam comes over and he kicks him essentially away from her, and she just kind of looks at him doe-eyed, like, can't believe that just happened, dude. So then after all of this bloodshed, Gilliam comes up and he says, all of us survivors, we must move forward, we must keep going. And now they start to interrogate Minister Mason. The parents want to know where the kids are. So Tanya and the father of Andy want to know where their kids are. They ask Minister Mason, where are they? And she says, I don't know. But they've got her arm stuck out, and they start hitting her arm, much similar to the way that they hit the dad's arm, but her arm's not frozen, so it doesn't break apart into a million pieces like his did. She said that she'll get him to the front, but in order to do that, he has to promise that he will kill Wilfred. And he asks, why should I trust you? And she says, because I want to live. So then we cut to nighttime. Curtis and Gilliam are discussing Curtis's leadership. Throughout this entire movie, Curtis doesn't believe that he has a right to lead, essentially. It's not so much that he doesn't think that he can lead. He just doesn't think that he has the right to lead, in my opinion. That's kind of how I saw the way that it played out, was he just didn't feel like he had the ability to, because of the way that his life had kind of played out, essentially, in how he had reacted and acted when they first got onto the train.
Which I feel like we get that fully at the end. And I think we didn't mention, if you haven't seen it, Gilliam is missing 2 limbs, an arm and a leg. And he told the people to take a shower, because this comes back up in this conversation. Anybody who survives, go take a shower after the fishmen killed people.
After they take the water room.
And so then now they're talking about that, because the arm thing comes up here, which we don't get until the end. But
yeah, he says that he can't be leading. He has 2 arms, is what he says. And it doesn't quite make sense, because we're like, why does having 2 arms matter so much?
But we find out later, not a pothole.
Definitely not a pothole, unless you fell asleep.
I was waiting for that part. We're good.
So Gilliam instructs Gray the next day that he must go with Curtis. The next door opens. They walk through what looks like a greenhouse, essentially. Yes, go ahead.
I'm just raising my hand for people at home. I rewound this 300 times. My boyfriend was in the room, and I go, babe, watch this. So I rewound it to the end of the scene where we were in the car with it gets dark. It's like you feel the death. And I was like, this is when we lived in New York. The door opened And you walk and there's all the green, and I was like, that's us moving to California. And I just kept rewinding it. And it was literally so perfect. You know what I mean? Like our apartment in New York had no light. We had no light for like 13. And I love New York, but you're like in the subways, it's dark. Right. You're like, you're like carrying your whole world on your back because you don't have enough time to go home in between things. So I was like, New York, California. New York, California.
That's hilarious.
Just covered in blood. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I can't make it home. I can't make it home.
And you're just wearing like all sorts of grime on you from the day because you're just like, oh, I will make it through. I will make it through.
Yes. And then you come out, you're like, what are these fruits on trees? Oh my goodness. What have I been doing?
Oh my gosh. That's
Fresh
hilarious.
air? What is it?
What is
Sunshine?
this? Is that a bird chirping? Oh, so
Oh,
great.
That's hilarious.
What's happening here?
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. I don't know if y'all have it in LA area, but like here in Arizona, like we have like lots of citrus groves, but they have to paint the bark white to protect it from sun damage. Do y'all have painted bark?
No, we do not have that.
No.
I think you're in a whole new level of sun, but that's very
Yes.
interesting.
I didn't even know that's why they did it. I thought it was just decoration. What? Because you always see that in Sun City, like where the old people live or the retired community. I don't see that anywhere else. Oh,
You are
that's
clearly not paying attention.
Oh,
If you ever go out to
wow.
the East Valley,
Oh, I'm never out there.
So
I had no idea.
So we're now in the greenhouse car, and they're just kind of looking around, and they are stunned by oranges. They're stunned by trees and leaves, much like I am anytime that I go back to the East Coast. And I'm like, oh, I miss trees. I miss. And they're looking at people as they're reading and watering plants, and they're looking back at them like, who are you? You're a new species. You're a new breed of people. What? You exist? And they continue walking past. And then they enter into an aquarium car. This car is amazing.
Like there's water all around them. The fish are over top of them.
Yeah.
I always wanted to have a shower like that. That was my dream.
So I'm going to continue to talk about Phoenix some more. So we now have an actual like aquarium in Arizona. It's in Scottsdale called Odyssey Aquarium. And in the bathrooms, it leads to the shark tank. Like you can see the shark tank from the bathrooms.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's really neat. And then, of course, we also have where it's like a tunnel that you walk through with the aquarium over above, similar to what we see in the string car in this movie. So you can have that same experience of walking through the aquarium with the aquarium all around you, over top and on the sides of you, very similarly. So if you ever come out to Phoenix, let me know. I'll take you around.
I love that. I wonder how much they have to reinforce that glass. You know what I mean? Woo!
Right. You think bulletproof glass is amazing. This has to be like 3,000 times stronger.
Next level stuff.
I saw Star Trek The Voyage Home when they had to put the whales in that tank.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my.
So in this specific aquarium car, we see that there's a sushi restaurant. So this is where Minister Mason says that sushi can only be served twice a year. Celeste, did you say specifically what this conversation was?
Oh yeah, Octavia's character, she then goes, why? Because y'all run out or something like that. So this is where they exchange some words.
Yeah, basically it has to do with the proper ecological balance of the fish that they have in the aquarium. So they can only harvest it twice a year. I think it's in January and then in July. And so this is also a commentary that we will continue to revisit throughout the rest of the film, as well as about this idea of ecological balance or population balance. Otherwise, they get overcrowding and things of that nature. Just as they're served their sushi, of course, Minister Mason gets a plate of sushi, but Curtis takes out the protein block and says, no, you have to eat this. And so Minister Mason takes the protein block and takes a small little chunk out of the corner of it and chews on it a little bit.
But she must know what it is. So it's probably, That's probably why she's all.
So the next train that we go through is, to me, it looks like a butcher's freezer because you got carcasses hanging everywhere and it looks really cold in there. So it looks like a butcher's freezer. And then we go into a classroom. I'm not sure why the children's classroom is so close to the butcher's freezer, but that is not my expertise.
Yeah, maybe it's just in alphabetical order. Butcher, children.
A B,
Disco.
C class. Yeah.
We have the Afropunk Club later. Oh my. So we have a really interesting interaction in the classroom. So I don't know about you all. I have absolutely no idea what children's ages are. So I think these children are like 6, maybe 7. I don't know. Any guesses?
They're like chest high. Between waist and chest high. What is
They
that,
look
second
like
grade?
maybe like 2nd grade.
I would guess second
Yeah.
grade.
Okay. Yes, all right. 2nd grade. We've decided they are 2nd graders, and Allison Pill is their teacher. Her actual character's name is Teacher. She has no other character name than Teacher. We looked it up.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is wild. But okay. So, in this classroom, it's basically, they're just all being taught, if we leave the tray, you will die.
I mean, it's like a funny thing they say too. We freeze to, they sing it. They're like, we freeze to death and die.
We all freeze and die.
Like, oh, it's a great song.
And they do like this weird karate chop from their head.
And then they do like a weird dab when they're like talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
Wilfred.
They're like their own little nursery rhyme with dance moves. Yeah.
I feel like it's like 1950s housewife meets with like what the way we were presented with what like communist Russia taught their children, like the mix of the two.
Yeah.
Now, whether they did or not, I'm not, if there are Russians listening, I'm not saying that you dabbed. I'm just saying that this is how it got reflected back to us.
No, we know that they definitely dabbed. That's exactly how it went down.
Stalin and the dabbers.
America was just late to the party, We just came 30 years late. It's fine. So inside this classroom, we're shown basically a propaganda video about the history of Wilford's train also. So we learned that Wilford's train came about and everybody made fun of Wilford for the train itself. But if it weren't for Wilford and his magical idea of having this train run on sustainable power constantly, then we wouldn't be alive. And it runs throughout every continent of the world, and it's a magical thing, essentially. During this point in time, we hear about a story that 3 years after everybody joined the train, we hear about the revolt of the 7. So 7 people tried to stop the train, quote unquote, or escape the train, and shortly after they left the train, they froze solid and they died. Nam turns to Yono and he explains that he knew the leader of those 7, and she was an Inuit woman. And so she was one of the original Eskimo women. And so from her, he learned a lot about different snow patterns and different winter patterns. And so he was sad to see her leave.
And he said that she's in the leader because you see the bodies frozen on the side of the mountain. Did we get the idea that that might be her mother?
Oh, I did not get that.
Oh.
Because I felt when he spoke of this woman, there was she taught him everything about snow, but he seemed, there was and we know that she was born on the train.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like there was such a love in his voice for this woman.
That is
Oh.
highly likely.
That's a possibility. I didn't even think about that.
I just felt like there was a little something going on there.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out why he wouldn't have gone then. I need to know that backstory. I need a movie on that. What happened there?
Maybe he stayed to take care of the kid.
Maybe. He's like, okay, you go first, and then in a year, I'll come back and find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe.
Or maybe he just didn't get out in time.
That's true. We have so many theories now.
Yeah.
So many questions.
So many questions. So many what ifs. Now introduced to New Year's eggs. Do you all have any New Year's eggs tradition?
No.
What is
But
that?
I had a lot of eggs.
That's true.
You're like, I've had
You did
enough
talk
eggs.
about that.
I'm done.
You're like, if I never have to eat another boiled egg again, I will be happy.
I'm going to be boiling eggs right after this because I've gone through the whole pot.
Oh no.
Oh,
So
no.
out comes this gentleman who looks very, if you've ever seen the show Fringe, he looks very much like an observer, just like bald, no hair at all, just in a like gray suit. Like
He looks like the egg.
Yeah, I think he's titled as like Eggman or something like that. So he's pushing like a cart of eggs, like hard-boiled eggs, and then he had like a basket of eggs also. Everybody comes and they take eggs, and they say, "Oh, they're still warm. They're warmed and heated and cooked by the water of the engine, the magical engine of the train." And I'm like, okay, what's happening here? And then in Curtis's egg, he sees the bottom of it, and there's one of those bullets that has the magical message. And I can't remember what it said.
It says something that's a precursor to that they're going to have guns, the bullets. It's some kind of this is about to happen.
Like a
I don't remember
warning.
what the
Yeah.
exact word was. It's a
I don't
warning.
either, but he knew that something was going to go down right away.
And then they edit directly to them saying,
to them.
"Oh, you thought these bullets were extinct," and they pull gun egg.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So we also see the older gentleman from the very beginning of the movie who played at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. His name is Jared. And he's all cleaned up, and he's got his tails, he's got his suit on, and he's playing his violin lovely for the children. And then as everybody's eating their eggs and they're looking around, and all of a sudden the teacher pulls out a gun from inside the basket of eggs.
This very pregnant teacher. Yeah.
So pulls out a gun, starts shooting all the people. I don't know what happened to the children at this point in time, by the way. Like, all of a sudden they were gone.
Were they gone or did they lay down? No, she didn't shoot any kids.
I think they're under their desks.
Ron DeSantis in America. They have been running this drill. We're arming teachers.
Oh my gosh. So then Gray had a knife and he threw it at her. He's a very excellent knifesman. And he threw it at her and he got her right in her carotid, and down goes the teacher. Meanwhile, the eggsman, he's been pushing the cart of eggs all the way down to the end of the train as well. And he took everybody out via assault gun down at the end of the train. So there's that on that. The lack of bullets, we learn, is all just a ruse. It was all just a lie. And we see on the screens that we're playing the propaganda that we have Mob Man number 1. He has Gilliam, and he shoots him executioner style. And Gilliam is now... So Tanya brings Curtis out of his initial state of shock, and she tells him that you need to lead us now. You need to go. We need to go. And so Curtis picks up the gun and he takes out Mason. She was originally begging for her life, Minister Mason. And she's like, "No, please, please, please. I can't. We can do this. We can do this together." And he's just like, "Nope, won't hear of it." And he just takes her out. So the remaining group, which I believe is like 4 or 5 of them at this point.
Yeah.
There's not a whole
Very
lot
few
of them.
left.
They continue to push forward. And we see in incredibly posh, like 50s, 60s style, luxury, high class train car.
When people are getting there, there's like a guy going to the dentist. There's like people reading. They're having like full lives at the front of the train.
Right. Like getting their hair done, like getting mani-pedis, like getting cocktails, all sorts of things.
They're living their
There's
best
dinner
lives up there.
parties.
Yep.
There's a dance hall of some sort.
Like yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're hitting a point in the railroad where we hit a tight curve, and the mob man is standing in the classroom. And our group has only progressed so far. And he sees them across the way, and he starts to shoot across the way. And apparently this glass, even though it's threateningly freezing outside, this glass is not bulletproof. So he can shoot bullets through it all the way through to the other side, and Curtis then returns fire. So they're shooting at each other through the glass. Neither of them are able to hit each other, so they're just wasting bullets that they know that they only have a finite amount of. But they're like, hey, we'll continue to go with it.
And the mob guy, one of the people on his team was like, don't do this. He's like trying to plug the holes. And then the mob guy kills him. Right. Didn't he? Yep. He was like, don't ruin my anger.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this guy's motive? Like, what is he after?
I think he's just worked up at this point. Do you know what I mean? He's got laser focus because it's not even logical to shoot through. You're not going to do it. You're just poking holes.
Mm-hmm.
Literally.
I'm confused because didn't, like, at the very beginning, they caught the mob guy. Like, they had him.
There's two.
Yeah. Oh, so this is a different mob guy in a gray suit?
Yes, there's two. They have similar looks.
I thought it was the same person. I'm like, didn't he die?
There was a brunette one with longer hair, and then this is the blonde one. And I really think that, like, I think he did a wonderful job. However, I would have loved to have seen, like, a Val Kilmer in this role, but I also would have loved to have seen a Vincent D'Onofrio in this role too. Like, I feel like those two actors do such wonderful jobs in those types of roles too.
I don't know who they are.
I feel like they were going like Austrian or Russian henchmen, kind of, because you hear him speak in the final scene, and he has a very strong accent.
So now that there are a couple of holes in the glass, Nam sees that a snowflake falls through the glass, and we get a slow-mo of the singular snowflake. Nam gets to the door, and they're able to get through to the next car just as the mob man catches up as the door closes. And so now they're all in a sauna car. The mob man and about two other guards make it through, and mob man, he unabashedly just starts shooting into different sauna stables, and he kills a doctor, it looks like. And so one of the guards like, hey, you just killed a first class passenger. And so he shoots the guard, and the other one's like, I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nope.
Gray starts to take him on one-on-one, and then Curtis starts to take a few shots, but is taken out, essentially. Like, he's knocked out, so he doesn't get very far. Tanya makes a valiant effort because she's got a machete, but she doesn't quite cut it.
Good pun.
Thank you.
Doesn't quite hack it.
Curtis tackles him, but the mob man knocks him out. And right as he goes to stab Curtis, Gray blocks it with his hand. Now, this is one of the most gruesome deaths I think I saw, like, in this movie. So mob man gets him up, and he grabs Gray, and he stabs him with the knife that's through his hand into his heart. And that is the end of Gray. And I'm like, oh, that is just extra gruesome.
It's the slow puncture that gets me every
puncture
time.
that's so upsetting. Also, like, what a to step in to put your hand in front of somebody to take the knife through their hand.
Oh, poor Gray. He deserved more.
Yeah, he was a terrific character.
He was, even though he had no words. He had absolutely no. He said absolutely nothing. But we know everything about that character because he had so much emotion and everything that he did with his body.
It's really how I like my men. You know what I mean?
I think so much more could be solved with just no words being said by men.
No words, and just show up when we need you and do what you do, and then no words it.
Actions, no words, please, and thank you.
I love it. So Tanya's out, Gray is out. We're still looking for Nam. We're still looking for Yona. And at this point in time, we're pretty sure that Curtis is down for the count. And so mob man is continuing to search. He opens up one of the sauna stalls, and he sees a woman in a stall, and she asks him in a different language, hey, can you shut the door, jerk? And he does not. And all of a sudden, then Nam shoots out from behind her, and they get into a fight. And he's got like a bar, and he starts to choke out the mob man, and Yona grabs the machete from Tanya's hand, and she goes to stab him, but Nam takes her hand away and says, nope, you're not going to do that. And so then Curtis grabs it from her and stabs Mob Man in the side. Mob Man is choked out, and supposedly Mob Man is dead. And the three of them continue on. Next, we're into the next car. Now, this is what I consider the rave car. We have party goers. There are coats strewn without. We've got dancing. We've got chrono. We've got cigarettes. We've got drinking. We've got leather abound.
It's like a little bit like an orgy.
Yeah.
Yeah, all sorts of things. Kind of an anything goes kind of a situation happening here. Curtis is very focused. He's just focused on getting straight to the end of that train car, and nothing's going to get into his way. Meanwhile, Nam and Yono, they're trying to clean up. They're like, I'm going to take this coat, and I'm going to take all the chrono, all this chrono, and they're just cleaning up as best they can as they get through the train car.
Well, the rave car also was interesting because each car is like a different color tone for like the visual of the movie. And that car was very red. And then you have these like people that have just been 9,000 fights walking through, and they're just like this massive ripped clothes and, you know, walking through this like red people, you know, so visually all of these cars are different, and it really adds to just the overall feel of the movie.
There's major contrast going on between the themes.
And it feels so disrespectful to people in the rave car. They're just like doing drugs and like everybody in the back's dying. Not that the other cars aren't too, but this one you're like, are we partying?
Yeah.
Right.
They're living it up, man.
They're living like it's 1999.
Yeah.
They really are.
And then we get into this next car. We've got like, it looks like a data warehouse. Like perhaps it's the back room of the CIA. I don't know. Like there's monitors, there's different wires going on. It looks like they're monitoring a lot of things going on, and they just continue to walk on through. And they get to the final car, the car that leads to the engine room. And this just kind of looks like a bridge over to a door with some large gears that could kill you in an instant if you fell into it, which we will find out later. So as we get to the door, Curtis starts to get more and more worked up. He's like, we need to open up the door. We need to open up the door. And Nam is like, just calm down. They get into a little bit of an altercation. And then Nam sits at the door itself, and Curtis sits at the end of the bridge. And Nam offers Curtis his last cigarette. And Curtis tells him a story. And he tells him what happened when people first boarded the back of the train, that it's all just chaos, and that they were just trying to get onto the train, and that they didn't even have a moment to feel grateful. And he explains that what he hates about himself most is that he knows what people taste like, and that babies taste best. And in one specific instant, a group of people were trying to steal a woman's baby to eat, and an older man stepped up, and he cut off one of his arms in exchange for a baby. And he said, can you guess who that baby was? And he said, that baby was Edgar. And that old man was Gilliam. And that he was the one who killed Edgar's mother. From then on, people were cutting off arms and legs to help each other survive. He really wanted to, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't make it happen. And then a month later, they brought in the protein bars. And Curtis has hated Wilford ever since then. And now he's here. He's right in front of that door, right so close to Wilford, in order to get to him, in order to confront him about all of this and all the humanity that he's had to leave behind because of this. And then Nam tells him he doesn't want to open up the gate to Wilford. He wants to open up the gate to outside. And Curtis asks, and to what? To freeze to death? And Nam explains, but what if we don't? I've seen that plane that we saw earlier every year, and I've seen more and more of it each year. meaning that there's less snow, and ice, meaning that it's getting warmer out. And Curtis just thinks that he's high and he's just not thinking straight, and so he just completely blows him off. Nam says that the chrono is a bomb, highly flammable, and this is what he's been collecting all the chrono for. And then he sees the door, and he puts the chrono onto the door, and just as he does, the engine room door opens, Claude comes out with a gun, she shoots Nam, and he falls to the ground. She then tells Curtis, "You are cordially invited to have dinner with Wilford." So we just had some very intense moments there.
Oh yeah, the eating of the people cut their limbs off to, you're like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, would I be able to cut my limb off? You know what I mean? You're like, oh.
Right. So many questions.
So many questions. But then it then sums up why we had earlier, I can't be your leader, I have two arms.
Mm-hmm.
And why Chris Evans feels like he can't be a leader because he's still carrying that guilt.
And especially when Edgar talks to him about it, because Edgar initially, like, had it not been for Gilliam, Edgar wouldn't have been around.
And he killed Edgar's mom. And then also, I love that Claude always has like a suit, like a bright colored suit on. Like, it's just so mismatched with the world around her. Yeah.
Do love it. So after she's shot Nam and she's invited Curtis in, she grabs the chrono off of the door, and then they close the door, and we're introduced to Wilford, this magnanimous, I think that's the word. Don't know.
It's definitely, I think, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Definitely Wizard of Ozzy inventor Wilford, who's played by Ed Harris.
And he's in a bath, like a silk bathrobe. So rude. So rude.
He's very like Hefford? What's the guy at the Playboy Mansion? Hugh Hefner. Yeah, that one. That's the one.
I like making it a Hefford as a verb. He's been Hefford.
That's exactly what it is.
Hefner.
So he commends Curtis for making it the entire length of the train. He says nobody's ever done that before. And they discuss that each situation has its drawbacks, and that basically he goes into the idea of natural selection and culling the herd in order to maintain balance in the train's ecosystem. So coming back to that idea of natural selection and making sure population balance and stuff. Basically very
Thanos-y.
What did you say?
I said very Thanos-y.
Oh, yes. It is very Thanos-y.
Yeah.
I love that. Wilford then explains that he and Gilliam had this all planned, and that Gilliam had to pay the price because it got a little bit more out of hand than what they had planned. Curtis is sitting in just shock and horror and anger, and he cannot believe that Gilliam actually was part of this. And just some of the things that Wilford is saying really makes him believe that Gilliam was part of this, that especially that being with a woman is easier with two hands, and like some of the other phrases that he uses, all the things that he would use and say, and the fact that he's there because of Gilliam and that he feels used. And then we cut back to Yona and Nam, and a raver is coming after them. And after knocking them into one of the large gears, they see a huge mob of nightclubbers. Then we come back to Curtis and Wilford having their conversation. And then Wilford says that he needs to show him something. And he has him go into the rotating vessel with white lights and asks Curtis whether or not he's ever really been alone. This is where Wilford hands him a message and a bullet, and it says train. So that's the point where you fell asleep, Celeste, and we find out that Wilford's the one writing all the notes and the bullet.
Holes are making sense now.
All the potholes, yep.
Oh, plot.
So Wilford tells Curtis that he wants Curtis to take over the train. He says, I'm getting old and I need you to be my successor, essentially. The train now has the perfect number of people, and the train is now humanity, and that he's responsible for taking over and leading humanity. We switch back over to the fighting, and we see that Mob Man is back alive. And Claude comes out of the room, and just as she does, Yono bashes her over the head and starts shooting at the Mob Man because she sees him, and she misses. She shoots a couple of other people, but she cannot shoot the Mob Man. He says, "You missed," as if she didn't notice that. So she grabs a hold of the chrono that Claude had taken from her, though, and she goes and she puts it back onto the door. And then she asks Nam where the matches are, and he says that Curtis has them. So Curtis and Wilford are continuing their conversation, and Wilford is talking and saying, you know, look at how they're all fighting. We need to put this back in order, and you're the person to help them all. And Yono runs over and asks him for the match, and Curtis rebuffs her. She cannot believe it. She's kind of taken aback. She's just spent this entire journey from the back of the train to the front with him, and she's like, I don't believe this. All of a sudden, she goes to the tile, one of the tiles on the floor, and she grabs a fork, and she's clawing at the edges of this tile, and she starts to pick it up, and Curtis runs down and he helps her. And we see a little boy trapped underneath this tile with gears rotating all around him. And Wilford says, you know, the train used to be completely self-sustaining, but it broke down a little while ago. So now it's mostly self-sustaining. But luckily, because of the back of the train, they make so many children. They're the perfect size to keep the train running, and basically dehumanizes people from the back of the train.
Also, a lot of them have been doing this act out. Tilda Swinton, like when she came back and did her speech and everything, there was a lot of hand act outs, and this is where I don't know if they're dropping something into the gear or they're pulling something out, but that's what it has been to making the train go.
Yeah, I think it's pulling something out. Like it looks almost like they're pulling out like gunk or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like coal, but it can't be coal. And then that's the hand thing they've all been making, not the dabbing, the other thing.
It kind of reminds me of like when you go and you change your oil, and like your oil kind of has like sludge in it sometimes. So that's what it reminds me of.
And the kid's down there and he's totally focused on it. And that's when the other kid comes out.
Yeah. So Wilford actually shuts the tile on him and explains this all. And Curtis then goes and he beats the crap out of Wilford's face. And he goes back down to the tile and he picks it back up. And then at this point in time, he shoves his arm down into the gear, and he stops it long enough so that way he can try and pull Tim out. While he's doing that, this is when he does see Andy. He walks past him, and Andy is like in a trance. He is fully focused on just getting inside this cylinder that pops out from inside of the train itself, and it looks like he's going to sit inside of like the spaceship, essentially, that kind of functions the train itself. And he goes inside, and there's nothing that can get Andy out of this trance. And then Curtis grabs the matches and he hands it to Yono so she can go ahead and go light the chrono on fire. He scoops Tim up from the inside of the gears underneath the tile.
Well, first Tim won't look at him, and it's like, is he going to do an Andy? Just be so in it that he doesn't. But then he reaches up to get out.
It took so long. It felt like it took so long.
Out.
I was like, come on, kid, come on. So it finally happened. He finally was able to get him out. And this is where I suppose Curtis got what he wanted and he lost his arm because he was able to do a selfless act for the good of others. So Yono runs to go light and detonate the chrono. And then she runs back to Curtis in her fur coat.
They pulled out of the raving room. That's when they picked up the fur coats.
Yep, they pulled the fur coats out of the rave room.
I don't know where they got the boots. I'm going to say that.
I don't either. I think they went back for them.
They must have got them from there, but like that was glossed over. And
so Wilford sits back down and he goes back to his steak essentially. And he's like, stop being so idealistic. So then Nam runs to them. Curtis, Nam, Yono, and Tim are all within the engine room. And Curtis and Nam are on the outside of Yono and Tim. Tim and Yono are huddled up underneath her fur coat, but the two men are on the outside of them. And we see the detonation of the chrono happen, and a large explosion takes place just outside of the engine room. We also see an avalanche starts to happen, and a ripple effect of this is that all of the train cars start to basically come apart. Many of the train cars from the back are taken out by the avalanche, and the train cars from the front are blasted from the explosion. And the sole survivors from this entire explosion and crash are Yono and Tim. Once they come out of the crash, Yono and Tim are looking around. They're on the side of the mountain, and as they look up, they see a polar bear, meaning that not all of life is lost. And that is the end.
And the polar bear sees them. It's a very game recognized game moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hopefully it doesn't recognize them too much. Like,
Yeah, hopefully it isn't like tasty.
Hopefully it's not like, here's my next meal.
I think that there could be people in that train. We're not
That's true.
100% sure if everybody is, but they get out.
cool.
No.
So we think that it passed the Bechdel test.
What did people not like about that ending?
I don't know. I couldn't figure that out.
Wait, what did Richard say? Like, why did he not like it?
He never explained it to me.
Oh.
He never explained it. I think it was just because, like, at the very end, everybody just died or was, like, assumed dead. I think that was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, that was all of humanity was on that train. And then just everybody was gone.
I think there's going to be other people.
Yeah. I think there has to be.
There has to be some survivors. Yeah.
I also think that there's going to be somebody else in the world that made it that we didn't know about, that's like in a bunker or maybe at a part of the world where they didn't go through. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just follow the train tracks.
Yep.
It's been 18 years since it started, you know? Like, somebody's got to be somewhere.
Somebody's going to be somewhere.
Yeah. It's an I Am Legend situation. You just don't know.
Yes.
You don't know.
I think
Really quick, back to what you said about the mob guys. I kind of, in my mind, had this idea that they would look quote unquote Aryan. They were both cast that way because of this whole preordained conversation that they're floating out, which feels very Third Reich-ish.
Yeah, that is true. Like all of the guards and I believe everybody in the first class cars, they're all very white.
Yes. So that's why I think in my head, that's why they looked like that.
That makes a lot of sense.
I don't know if I read into that too far, but the preordained conversation, as soon as somebody says something like that, you're like, okay.
Yeah, always. Like I'm always worried whenever anybody's like, we have this right and you have that right. I'm like, I'm not so sure about that.
You're like, I'm going to guess that you're problematic across the board.
Exactly. So this was actually based off of a graphic novel called, I'm going to try and say this in my best French. No, I got nothing.
Is it French?
Yeah, I think so.
It looks like it. Yeah.
The illustrator is Jean-Marc Rochenet. Nope, I did not say that right. I haven't said French in so long. Do you speak any French?
I went to school in Quebec.
There you go.
Oh.
Is this in the notes? Jean-Marc Rocher.
Rocher. Yeah.
Personnage.
Ah, so much better than what I had. So
But also quite possibly totally wrong.
It sounds right.
it sounds so much better.
I'm pretty sure it's Rocher.
Rocher.
Personnage.
Is that what it was?
Senage, I think.
Sinage. Someday I will get better at
I lost
languages.
it. I could be totally wrong.
I think you're so much better at this than I am. So I'm going to trust you.
I
I'm gonna
wouldn't.
trust you.
I would not.
I trust you. I trust you.
Don't do it.
So Chris Evans personally contacted Bong for the audition after hearing the casting news.
Oh, that's cool.
So he specifically wanted to be in this. And then in the post-credit scenes of the Avengers, where they're all eating shawarma, he has his hands on his face because he was growing out his beard for this film.
Oh, this was the movie. I heard about that.
Yeah. And then also, I didn't have it in the notes specifically, but he had to wear like a trench coat and everything like that because he was so bulked out for his Captain America. But because he was in like the back of the train, he was supposed to be kind of lanky and kind of
It wouldn't have made
gaunt-ish.
sense. Yeah.
So he had to like cover up his muscles.
We're like, cover up them muscles, man.
I know.
They're like, we can't have you hulking out here.
Not doing parkour in the back.
We already have Gray.
Yeah, except for Gray. He's the only one.
So without further ado, thank you so much, Leah. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We greatly appreciate it. We are so glad that you could join us for Snowpiercer.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It was so fun. Also, it's so good to get re-traumatized by that arm out the train scene. I was watching it and I was like, I blacked this out and now it's back in there.
Hopefully it won't be for too long. So is there anything specific that you would like to plug?
I would love to plug something. Thank you so much. Please check out our podcast, Where You Raise My Wolves. And then if by some chance somebody is in San Diego on June 18th, which is a Sunday, I am headlining the Gold Room at Mic Drop Comedy. And so I moved recently from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so it's like a new area for me to, so this is my first time headlining in San Diego. Mic Drop Comedy is the club. So you would go there for tickets. There's 2 Leahs on the same night. So I'm the 7:30 show in the Gold Room. Would love it if you came out. I'll be running my hour. If you're listening at home, please come out. I think you could drive there from Arizona. I don't know.
That's a doable drive. That's like 5 hours or so.
So check it out. And then Memorial Day weekend, I'm at the Vail Comedy Festival in Colorado.
Love it. Yay!
Thank you for having me. So fun.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Caffeinated Flicks. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram at Caffeinated Flicks Pod or email us at caffeinatedflicks@gmail.com.
And just like every other podcast, we would love it if you could follow us in your podcasting app and give us a rating or review. Your feedback helps us get better. And if you're enjoying us so far, please tell a friend.
We'll catch you on the flick side.